Hey Deb, it's me, Dr. Daniel, and this is your functional health report video interpretation. This report was, of course, generated using the blood chemistry data from your blood draw on June 9th of this year, 2020. Now, this report is also attached to the note that you got that contained this video, so just make sure you're on the lookout for that. And when you download and open the report up, it's hyperlinked. So there's parts of the report that you can click on, and it'll take you to different sections, and it just makes it easier for you to navigate. For this particular video, we're going to be going through the assessment section, the analysis section, specifically blood test results, and then a potential health improvement plan if we wanted to base your recommendations solely on the data that we have here. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on functional body systems. The functional body systems index scores that you see here represent a bird's eye view of everything that's going on in your body, taking into account every single biomarker that was ordered for this particular study. Now, you can look at individual biomarkers, let's say like glucose or total cholesterol or HDL, which is good cholesterol, individual liver enzyme markers, right? So there's those individual markers you can look at, and those markers matter. You want to see what they're doing. How high are they? How low are they? But what matters more is actually the patterns that these markers represent. In other words, there are several markers that give you an indication of cardiovascular risk. So you want to look at how all those markers work together, not just them individually. The same thing with blood sugar, same thing with thyroid, liver. And so what happens is if you look at all those individual markers, you can then begin to put together a hierarchy of systems that are dysfunctional. So like I said, this is a bird's eye view of everything that's going on in your body. As you can see here, your cardiovascular risk is pretty high at 94% likelihood of dysfunction. Second to that would be blood sugar dysregulation, and then thyroid function. Now, starting from the top, you can see here cardiovascular risk is at 94%. If you see a little green square like that, you can click on it. It'll take you to a section to learn more about this particular score, the rationale, in other words, what biomarkers were used to determine which systems were dysfunctional. If you click on it again, it just takes you back to the main screen here. Now, everything above 50% would be the area that we'd want to focus on. So definitely reducing cardiovascular risk, improving blood sugar regulation, and thyroid function is a priority. Moving on, looking at accessory systems, these are the systems that support the main physiological systems. And as you can see here, your acid-base chemistry is imbalanced at 80% dysfunction. This indicates that you have pH imbalance in the body, which is usually due to nutritional deficiencies. Second to that would be your lipid panel. Of course, if your cardiovascular risk is elevated, we would expect to see your lipids to be abnormal. Inflammation markers are also high, so your inflammation index score is high. And then there is some signs here for allergies, environmental toxins, and or digestive parasites, which, by the way, could be contributing to inflammation as well as elevated lipids. As far as nutrients go, this is not necessarily individual nutrient deficiencies, but how well your body is doing digesting, absorbing, and extracting nutrients from the foods that you're eating. So basically, we consume proteins, carbs, and fats from the food that we eat. Our stomach, small intestine have to extract vitamins, minerals, carbs, proteins from the foods that we eat. So this gives us an idea of how well that system's working. And as you can see here, your vitamin status is really high at 91%, suggesting that you're not doing a good job of extracting vitamins, carbohydrates, proteins from the foods you're eating, which of course, you know, as you know, food is one of the most important things that we could do to improve our health. Step one is eating the right foods. Step two is, are you able to fully digest and absorb those foods? And so if you're not able to digest and absorb the healthy food you're eating, we're going to have problems. And certainly this is what it indicates. Nutrient deficiencies, these would be specific deficiencies identified from this study. Definitely you need vitamin D. We need to incorporate some magnesium, vitamin B1, B12, and folate, so basically B complex. Calcium, but this would be more because of digestive enzymes, not because of low calcium. In fact, I wouldn't have you supplement with calcium. We would want to do digestive enzymes to improve nutrient absorption across the board. I'm going to click on the home screen, which takes us back to the table of contents. Now I'm going to click on blood test results. There were 85 markers ordered for this study, so a pretty comprehensive blood chemistry panel. Starting off with blood glucose, you can see that your fasting glucose is elevated. Normal blood glucose would be 75 to 85. So at 94, this is a pre-diabetic range. Definitely also when we look at hemoglobin A1C, hemoglobin A1C is a 3-month average of how well you've been handling glucose over the last 3 months. When it's above 5.5 but below 5.7, combined with blood glucose greater than 100, that would definitely be pre-diabetic. You're definitely moving in that trend. As you can see, a lot of these markers here are above optimal. Insulin, which is the most important hormone to regulate blood glucose, is also elevated. So definitely there's some glucose dysregulation that's occurring here, which could impact overall energy levels. It can impact body composition or abnormal weight gain. And certainly it also ties into cardiovascular risk. Moving on, looking at your kidneys, kidney function, we begin to assess with blood urea nitrogen, BUN. This is an indication of protein absorption, amino acid absorption. When it's low, it could indicate low stomach acid. Yours is borderline below optimal. So almost, into a low category. Creatinine is an indication of being under or over exercise. So as far as physical activity, this looks okay. The most important markers for kidney function are eGFR. We want these to be greater than 90. And definitely, I don't get concerned unless they're less than 60. So, you're in a pretty good range here, especially if we would say for your age. However, we definitely want to make sure you're drinking enough water to be supporting overall kidney function. As far as electrolytes go, sodium, potassium, the sodium to potassium ratio, and chloride are all within optimal ranges. Sodium is borderline high, sodium to potassium ratio is borderline high, but they're all optimal. Your CO2 is basically bicarbonate. Bicarbonate neutralizes acidity in the body. So if you have high levels of acidity, bicarbonate's going to be used up and therefore show up to be low. So this is where we would start to look at pH imbalances, which again are not because of the foods you're eating necessarily, but because of nutritional deficiencies. The anion gap is a calculation that we do in order to also determine pH balance. And the higher this goes, the more acidity there is in the body. So this is a strong indicator, again, of pH imbalance because of nutritional deficiencies. Uric acid is an indication of gout. So when we're consuming too much red wine, when we're consuming too much red meat, you'll see uric acid levels go up. And in some people, this can contribute to the formation of gout crystals, which can cause joint pain. The other thing to consider is that uric acid is also elevated with glucose dysregulation, and you had several markers to suggest glucose imbalances. And so, again, this is certainly something we want to work on correcting. As far as your proteins go, proteins can be an indication of protein absorption and digestion. You can see here that your total protein is low. So 1, maybe you're not eating enough protein during the day, or 2, if you are eating enough protein, you might not have enough stomach acid to be able to break down and absorb that protein. So you might want to support your body with a good digestive enzyme. Again, this kind of depends on how much protein you're eating. So those are questions that I'd have for you is, do you feel like you're eating enough protein? If you're not, then step 1 would be to work on increasing your protein consumption. If you are eating enough protein with every meal, then we need to support your body with the digestive enzyme to be able to absorb these proteins. And protein's important for skin. It's important for ligaments and tendons. It's important, obviously, for muscle function. So protein overall is very important. If you're not digesting and absorbing it, we're going to have problems globally or throughout the body. Moving on, looking at your minerals, calcium is normal. The calcium to albumin ratio is normal. Your phosphorus is borderline low. Your calcium to phosphorus ratio is borderline high. And then your magnesium is really low. Levels less than 2.0 are definitely magnesium deficiency. Magnesium is an important mineral. It is required for every single biochemical reaction that happens in your body, specifically beginning with DNA synthesis. Obviously, if you can't create DNA, well, then your DNA is what helps you to build proteins. It builds enzymes. It builds hormones. It builds brain chemicals. So all these things are going to be diminished whenever you have low magnesium. So that's certainly something that we need to work on correcting. Looking at your liver and your gallbladder, the liver really plays a major role in detoxification. All these liver enzymes are normal, so this suggests that you have normal liver function. However, your LDH is elevated, and an elevated LDH would be strongly associated with glucose dysregulation as well. So that's just something to consider. Again, it is a liver enzyme, but it's been connected back to glucose regulation, and we already know that you have a lot of markers demonstrating abnormal glucose regulation. As far as your iron markers go, your serum iron is borderline low or below optimal, but your ferritin, which is the storage of iron, is high. Now, when ferritin is high and serum iron is low, then ferritin is also a marker of inflammation. So this does suggest that you have some inflammation occurring in your body. This could be because of poor nutrient absorption. It could be because of poor fatty acid absorption, not getting enough omega-3 fats. Low vitamin D could also contribute to it. So that's just important to consider by itself. Now, looking at your lipids, your total cholesterol is not bad. I like total cholesterol to be anywhere between 150 to 220. So you're at 207. I would consider that to be okay. Your triglycerides are a little elevated. So definitely one of the best ways to reduce triglycerides is to reduce the amount of fructose or fruit sugar you're consuming. So let's just make sure that we're not eating too many fruits. I would say that fruit consumption should be moderate, maybe 1 to 2 pieces of fruit per day at the most, and if possible, 2 to 3 days out of the week only that you're consuming fruit. So like every other day kind of thing. As far as your bad cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, that is elevated. But again, I don't really look at this and say, okay, you're somebody who is developing heart disease or I'm concerned about that. I'll give you some initial dietary recommendations and nutritional supports that I would suggest to help work on this. But the glucose dysregulation would definitely make this, what we see here, worse. So getting your glucose under control is really the priority here. As far as your thyroid goes, you can see here there's a lot of thyroid markers that I order. And your thyroid is all normal. So a lot of your markers are optimal with the exception of TSH. There are a lot of things independently that could impact TSH. If you're not eating enough foods, TSH will be impacted. If you have inflammation, TSH will be impacted. If you have nutritional deficiencies, TSH will be impacted. This is basically the signal between your brain and your thyroid. Now, that looks like it's low, which would indicate hyperthyroid. But if we look at your thyroid hormones, you can see they're all normal. So I wouldn't be concerned with any kind of thyroid issue here. As far as inflammation goes, you're definitely showing signs of high inflammation, and this is certainly something that we need to get under control, especially when you have elevated glucose and elevated lipids. So again, it's not the cholesterol that we should be concerned with, it's the elevated sugar. It's not the cholesterol we should be concerned with, but the elevated inflammation. So certainly correcting these imbalances would be a priority. Vitamins, so an anti-inflammatory diet, which is basically, I'm going to recommend a 30-day paleo reset for you. And then we'll reassess to see what kind of improvements have happened along with the supplements I'm going to suggest. Looking at your vitamins, your vitamin D is really low, so that's definitely something we need to start supporting. Your B12 is high, but your folate is low. And then there's something called methylmalonic acid, which is actually a more specific measurement of B vitamin status. Methylmalonic acid requires B12 in order to be metabolized. So the lower that methylmalonic acid goes, the higher your B12 is. The higher your methylmalonic acid goes, the lower your B12 is. You can see this is optimal. So B12, I would say, would be okay, but folate is low. And usually when you have carbohydrate or glucose dysregulation, that also indicates thiamine deficiency. So these are things that we need to, again, continue to work on to try to support your body nutritionally. Looking at your red blood cells, your red blood cell production is a little high, but it's not, really abnormal, especially because your hemoglobin and hematocrit are normal. So this would indicate that you have normal oxygen saturation in your body. However, MCV is elevated, and with an elevated MCV, it indicates B12, folate, and vitamin C issues, deficiencies. So again, supporting your body with nutrients is one of the main things we need to do based on this analysis. Finally, looking at your white blood cells, your total white blood cells are low. When they're chronically low, or when they're low like this, which optimal would be 5.5 to 7, when they're 4.6, this would indicate that you've been fighting something for some time. Now, your total white blood cells indicate total immune power, and definitely it looks like it's suppressed here. You can then break white blood cells down into specific white blood cells that have specific functions in the body. Neutrophils are specific to bacterial infections. Lymphocytes are specific to viruses. Monocytes are specific to tissue damage. You can see yours are elevated. So this does suggest that your immune system is suppressed, fighting something. Your immune system's been fighting something because there's tissue damage occurring. And then your eosinophils are specific to parasites and environmental toxins. And these are really high. 0.5 or less is normal. You're at 5%. So definitely a strong indicator of intestinal permeability issues, digestive inflammation, or parasites. Now, from here, if you want to dig deeper, I would recommend a comprehensive stool panel. So if we talk about treatment options based on everything that I see here, there's definitely two pathways that you can take, or two options that I would recommend for you. Option one would be following a 30-day paleo reset. I would have you take vitamin D. I would have you take some cardiovascular and glucose supports over the next 30 days. We would reassess and see if there's improvements. If there aren't any improvements in 30 days, then we're going to want to do a comprehensive stool panel to investigate whether or not you have any infections, parasites, or anything disrupting your digestive system that could also cause all these problems. So that would be option A. Do a paleo 30-day reset for 30 days, take specific supplements to improve glucose and cardiovascular factors, correct your vitamin D, and then reassess. Or option B is to do all that, but you go ahead and undergo the digestive stool panel testing right now. So you let me know which one you want. I'm going to put together the recommendations no matter what, so that way you can evaluate them. And then if you could also complete the form that I sent to you, because that is a clinical tool that will allow me to better understand what I see from your blood chemistry as well. But like I said, I'm going to put together some recommendations. You just need to let me know if you want the comprehensive stool panel now, or if you'd rather wait to see if the initial treatment plan I put together works for you. And if it doesn't work for you, then we can always dig in deeper later.